Thanks for joining me today at Learnwake. My name is Brandon Judd, and I'm responding to Alex here, who submitted a personal coaching request through our mobile app. And he specifically in his request, he mentioned that he's been having a difficulty hitting grabs. He thinks that he doesn't have the right height in order to give him time to grab the board. He would also like to put more style into his ride. And gave some stats on his riding there. So in regard to your style and grab analysis request here, we're going to talk a little bit about your riding overall since you requested a personal coaching session here, and I'm going to emphasize specifically what you're looking for in the grabs and the style side of things. So couple things. First of all, we'll play a little bit here. I really like your riding, and you have a really, really pretty place to wakeboard in. So I think you're set up really well. When I coach students in person, you're like the perfect. You're at the perfect level that I like to coach because your fundamentals are pretty strong. You're really comfortable on the board, and there is so much that you can learn really fast. So it's really exciting because of how close you are without realizing it to a whole bunch of new tricks. And it's really fun for me to be able to coach people when they're at this level. So I'm hoping we can actually get a lot more than just your style and grabs covered here. I won't go into too much detail. I'll just kind of point you in the right direction. And want to make sure that you're feeling really comfortable after we're done with this, with exactly where you need to work on to get your riding to the next level. So let's go back to some of these clips here. I think this section where you go back and forth and do some 180s and switch 180s, I think this perfectly encapsulates the thing that's holding you back right now, and I want to talk about that a little bit in depth. So it's a lot simpler of a fix verbally than it is to actually ingrain in your brain. But the first thing is you're edging out really wide, and you don't have to go quite as wide. And here's why. That's a symptom of the real problem. And the real problem here is you're not standing tall at the wake. So this, I know it's switch, so you're going to kind of buckle anyway. But if you look at how much you get really bent right at the last second here, and what that does is it completely kills your pop. Imagine if you were jumping on the trampoline and then when, I don't know if you've ever been double bounced by a friend, but the way to kill a double bounce on the trampoline is to absorb all of the pop from the mat with your legs. And it looks right now like you were getting double bounced on the trampoline and you decided not to go up at all and just to absorb all of the mat's bounce. So that's essentially what's happening. So what happens here is you don't go very high. Instead, it's all across. I know it's really tough to do switch to trust that position, but even on your normal side, you come in, and if we can pause it at the right spots, your leg still is pretty bent. You're seated like you're in a chair. Now this position is very, very common, and the reason I mentioned, I'll get there in a second. So this is common, meaning that it's very easy to overcome. In the sense of diagnosing it. You know exactly what the issue is. You know exactly what to work on. The hard part comes in where you have to retrain your muscle memory to do it correctly. But that's not too difficult of a challenge because it's so clear on what the problem is. Sometimes with some line tension issues and things, it can get really confusing. But with this one, it's pretty straightforward. You just need to stand taller. The reason I mentioned the distance that you were edging out is because right now you are able to go wake to wake, even a little past the wake here. Had you stood tall all the way at the wake, you would have gone way into the flats, and it probably would have been a lot higher and further across than you initially expected to go. So edging out all the way to here, you're asking for trouble, meaning that if you were to stand tall at the wake with this type of an edge out, you just by nature you're going to buckle a little bit anyway, so that you don't go crazy high and crazy far out. So if you're to cut that like in half, it'll make it way easier for you to stand taller at the wake, because it'll be a lot less intimidating, and you'll actually go wake to wake instead of way out into the flats. So that setup is going to make this part of it much easier. So hopefully I can pause it here at that spot. There we go. All right, so here is the drill that I want you to work on. This, I think, will fix so much of what you're struggling with when it comes to airtime and style and the whole bit. So this drill is called heel side jumps, the standing tall drill. Essentially, you're just practicing locking your legs out, like Chad is in this position. He takes his knees and straighten his legs, pushing his knees almost backwards, like to fully extend them as much as possible. And it's a weird feeling. You almost feel like I don't know how to explain it, like the armpit of your knee, the knee pit, the backside of your knee. You almost want to drive that backwards. Thinking about doing that will force you to lock it out. Because sometimes people think they're standing tall, but then when you actually look at their legs, they're still a little bent. So this drill is going to really help you a lot. Follow it to a T, and you'll be surprised at just how much this is going to help you go up into the air. Your pop will be so much higher when that happens. So that said, being able to go much higher will give you a little bit more time to get the grab, but I wouldn't work on grabs yet. I would just get used to that extra height. Once you're comfortable and almost bored with that height, then you can start adding grabs and then insert other tricks, your 180s and all of that back into it. So should make everything way easier when you're doing that properly. That's your biggest thing that you're struggling with from what I'm seeing in an just overarching analyzation of your riding. I would recommend doing that drill switch as well as regular, as well as goofy. So do both versions of that. The reason why is because when you're trying to train your brain on a drill like this, it's really good, since the drill is kind of mellow, to do it both ways for a couple reasons. One is it gets your body symmetrical. You don't feel like you're working on one leg harder than the other, so just physically it feels better on you. But it also helps if you can kind of do it backwards mentally. It helps the normal side feel even easier. So that should, again, really help you a lot. All right, the next thing is you mentioned style. I just want to talk to you a little bit about style briefly before we get too far. Your style is going to come out, and you can't really see it too much yet, but your style is going to come out as you get really confident in the air in what you're doing. I know for me, when I'm working on a new trick, I know that the style of it is not really very present. I mean, outside of just my normal mannerisms. But once I get more comfortable and confident with it, I can actually make it look the way that I want it to in my head. And that just takes a little bit of time in getting your edges dialed. Once that happens and you can get your pop to where you're really comfortable with it, you'll be able to add a bunch of different grabs and different timing and tempo on when you spin, when and where you grab and how, and all that kind of stuff. It's going to really come out then. So I wouldn't stress about your style until you get that timing down and dialed. All right, so here's the next thing. Is I would really, really highly recommend this. I think this is the next step for you. It's called getting into the cuffed riding position. I don't know if you've done this much at all, but getting this earlier in your riding rather than later is going to make a lot of difference in what you're able to do. Because I think, honestly, you're ready. Once we get a little bit more comfortable standing fully tall at the wake, I think you're ready to start doing 360s, inverts, the whole bit. Because if you're not already, I didn't see that part of your riding yet, but it looks like you're right on that edge of being able to do that. So I would watch this video, getting into the cuffed riding position. Make sure that you get cuffed and then ride around a bunch. Do it regular, do it goofy, do it outside the wakes, inside the wakes, ollie in this position. Just play around with it. Get really comfortable looking away from the boat with two hands behind your back. That is going to set you up better for 360s and landing blind and all of that. So this is a really good one for you. The next thing is, if you did want to start working on some inverts, again, if you haven't already done them, I would recommend using this video, Tripping a Tantrum. I would start with some of these drills and work on the tantrum pop. I think that you could do it really well as long as we can get your legs fully straight, and that's the key. Once your legs are able to be straight at the wake, you can turn that pop into a tantrum pretty good with this drill. The next one is called low impact heel side back roll progression. This is where you do a back roll out in the flats without the wake, a bit of an air back roll. You kind of start there. Now, you don't have to successfully do an air back roll, but learning how this works and feeling how that works on the wake is going to get you set up to learn this wake to wake pretty quickly. So I think whichever one of those two you feel most comfortable with is a great place to start. And you should be able to get some 360s and some flips in there pretty quickly. But again, don't do any of those until you have done that standing tall drill a little bit. You can actually get into the cuffed stuff right away, even without that, just kind of in between. But I would focus specifically on getting those legs all the way straight on your heel side and toe side and switch jumps. And then you can start moving into some spins and inverts. So good luck. Thanks again for submitting this. I think you're on the right track, and hopefully we'll see some more requests from you. Thanks again.